All right, welcome everyone. We are very excited that you made it here tonight. Welcome to the launch of the 2020 Berkshire Earth Expo and our conversation about an environment for all people, a conversation about environmental justice. Welcome to our speakers and welcome to you, all the listeners who we cannot see, but we hope will be active participants in this conversation by using the chat function. So my name is Uli Nagel. I'm both with Living the Change Berkshires and the Harold Greenspoon Charitable Foundation, who collaborated on the expo and the related Cooler Communities Challenge and also this conversation. My co-host is Judy Fox. Judy, you want to say hi?
Yeah, hi. Very nice to be here. I'm a co-member of Living the Change Berkshires, and also I've been very involved in a national climate organization called Citizens Climate Lobby. And I'm very happy to be here.
Great. So just a big shout out to the Berkshire Museum for hosting the expo this year, and especially to Peter, who has been really wonderful to work with in putting this quite complex event online. So an environment for all people is a conversation about environmental justice, about the experiences of and the work and priorities for people of color in our community when looking at environmental issues. And I guess I've been in the climate movement for a very long time, but I have to admit that's only been about a year where environmental justice really appeared on my radar in a bigger way. And now, just lately, I learned that, for instance, people living in areas with higher air pollution are much more likely to get sicker and die from COVID. So, of course, the people who live in areas with higher air pollution are, as you can imagine, people of color. So this is just one example of a very long list of examples over many years and decades of what environmental injustice looks like. And there are many, many ways to approach this subject. So I'm inviting all you listeners out there to put a sentence into the chat about what this topic means to you, or what kind of questions you might have about it. And you can go ahead and do that now, and we will look at them in a little bit. But please go ahead and share just what comes to mind. Okay, welcome again to the speakers. Unfortunately, we cannot see Jamuna Sirker, but she's here and she can hear us and we can hear her. Jamuna is with Pittsfield Public Schools. Maya Richards is with Multicultural Bridge, and Anaelisa Jacobson and Nancy Gomez are with Manos Unidas. How about you all introduce yourselves in a few minutes? Jamuna, would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here with us. So I'm Jamuna Sirker. I'm the coordinator for Fine and Performing Arts for Pittsfield Public Schools. I'm also adjunct professor of communications at Berkshire Community College, and I'm an adjunct professor of theater at Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts. My work as an activist, however, it's embedded in my education work, and I'm a playwright and a director and producer. And I write about the climate a lot because I have been impacted tremendously throughout my life by climate disruption and the corporate greed that fuels it. And so Uli and I had talked about me sharing a personal experience, and I actually think, Uli, I'm going to talk about my experience with Hurricane Katrina. I was living in New Orleans I'm from New Orleans. I was born and reared in New Orleans, and I had been back after grad school in New Orleans doing theater and working as an educator when Hurricane Katrina hit. And that was the first of the big climate change events in the United States. And we had hoped that the lack of preparation that we experienced was because we were the first, but that nothing's changed. And so what my experience with Hurricane Katrina is that because our wetlands have been destroyed, the Louisiana wetlands have been destroyed by the oil and chemical industries. They have bought off the politicians over the past century and have purchased a license to destroy the environment. And Louisiana is the most polluted state in the United States. And because of that destruction to our environment, Louisiana no longer has wetlands, or it didn't when Katrina hit. Our wetlands were gone, and the wetlands serve as the natural buffer. As soon as a hurricane hits land, it starts to weaken. We had miles and miles of wetlands off the coast of Louisiana. And so we had been hit with much stronger hurricanes previously than Katrina, but the city wasn't devastated in the way it was after Katrina. And it's because there's no buffer anymore. There's nothing to soften the hurricane. So it hits the continent now full force with regularity. And as you all know, and as we all saw on the news, and heard on the radio, as we all took this in horror, was that the economic factor was revealed with such clarity. In terms of people who died or whose lives were destroyed, predominantly African American, predominantly middle and lower income people. And it's because a lot of lower income people couldn't evacuate. The city was under a mandatory evacuation. Not everyone has family to go to. I was fortunate. I have family in Texas and DC. I had places to go. But there were other people who had, their family was there with them in Louisiana. They had nowhere to go. And they couldn't afford hotels, or they couldn't take their animals. So people stayed. And a lot of the deaths were predominantly people of color. And the fallout in the aftermath in terms of loss of home, loss of income, absolute loss of community, and life transforming trauma, it was, everyone was impacted. No one escaped this unscathed, but the lasting impact really happened in the communities of color, where people's homes were destroyed or they died because they couldn't get out. So I think there's a strong economic factor that plays in to the climate disruption impact on communities of color. So that's my personal story. And Uli, do you want me to give out some information now, or do you want to wait on that?
Maybe we'll finish the introductions and then we'll come back to that. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Great.
Okay.
Great. Nancy and Anaelisa. Anaelisa, Colombia, and Nancy in Pittsfield, I think, from Manos Unidas. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes. Would it be okay if I did a very quick translation of, I'm just going to give a sentence or two about what Jamuna has shared?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Jamuna estaba diciendo que pues ha vivido mucho tiempo, gran parte de su vida en New Orleans, y que ahí pues cuando pasó el huracán Katrina, se vio realmente la destrucción del medio ambiente, de muchas tierras destruidas, pero también se vio la destrucción de la economía, más que todo de la gente de bajo ingreso y gente de color. Y pues ahí sí se vio como el medio ambiente y el racismo como que se conectaron, se cruzaron. Y eso pues para dar resumen. Okay. Entonces,
thank you.
Should we share? Yes, absolutely. Uli, you let us know when you're ready for us to share.
Yes, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Okay. This is Anaelisa Jacobson. I'm actually in Colombia currently, and I am sharing Nancy's device. So hopefully you can hear me okay. I represent Manos Unidas, Multicultural Educational Cooperative. I'm also here with Carlos Acevedo, who is part of Manos Unidas.
Hola, hi.
And runs an amazing organization working with children who are at great risk here in Colombia called Colores. And we're here with Nancy Gomez, our amazing co-directress and leader, community leader of all kinds, and community leader with Manos. We're really thrilled to be part of this panel. I think this topic is exceedingly important, and it's come even more to our attention with COVID and the struggles that many of our people, including our immigrant brothers and sisters, have been going through. Nancy, ¿tú entendiste?
Sí, gran parte.
Okay. Entonces, Nancy, ¿tú quieres decir alguna palabra? Uli, would it be a moment for us to share a brief anecdote, or would you prefer that in another moment?
It depends. You go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say that, one of the things that we found to be, on a personal level, like very impactful during COVID is, how many people who live in, situations where, they don't have the best access to resources, and, a lot of people have lost their jobs, that we find that, the kind of connection back to the basic things such as nature and growing food from the earth and reconnecting with like the basic goodness that is around us has been like extremely life-giving to people, and kind of a counterpoint to the struggles. And Nancy, ¿tú estás entendiendo lo que estoy compartiendo?
Sí, de un poquito de las funciones que nosotros estamos haciendo.
Sí, exacto.
Okay.
Y pues tal vez si quieres agregar alguna anécdota de cómo crees que la gente tal vez en ese tiempo ha tenido como una idea del medio ambiente en que necesitamos más que nunca, y de la importancia de cuidarlo o de volver a lo básico, como yo estaba diciendo.
Sí. Bueno, pues primero que todo yo quiero decir que este momento de COVID ha servido muchísimo para despertar la conciencia de muchas personas. Ana.
Sí, so this moment of COVID has been an awakening for many of our people.
Y es porque muchas personas a través de COVID tuvieron que empezar a conectarse con todos, con el que tienen tan cerca y con todos los que tienen lejos. Y ya el hecho de que estuvieran en otros países o en otra casa, aquí mismo en Pittsfield o aquí en los Berkshire o en Estados Unidos, ya no hacía ninguna diferencia, porque el distanciamiento y la pandemia hizo que nos pusiéramos todos en el mismo nivel.
And one thing that's really been amazing about COVID is this desire in our people, especially those who have been in the struggle of Manos, to connect with other people. And as Nancy says, COVID has in a way like helped us to be on equal footing, because we're all kind of longing for that connection and that feeling of belonging.
Y cuando todos paramos, la gran mayoría de las personas que no manejaban tecnología aprendieron y empezaron a conectarse por necesidad y empezaron a comunicarse mucho más.
And because of this, many people who were never kind of connected to community and to movement for change have become connected through these times in a virtual manner. Y si menciona algo sobre la conexión con el medio ambiente,
exacto, ahí voy. Entonces, cuando esa comunicación se dio,
When this connection started to grow,
nos dimos cuenta todos de lo que estaba pasando en el mundo entero. Y es que la humanidad entera tuvo que parar. Denme un segundo, yo como.
So this connected us to what's happening in the world, and this made us stop and think about how humanity is connected back to nature, back to the basics.
Y en muchas ciudades, y por ejemplo, del lugar donde yo vengo, que es Colombia y específicamente Medellín, el año pasado tuvieron que parar en la ciudad muchas cosas por la contaminación. Pero en esta ocasión no fue por la contaminación, el virus hizo parar todo el mundo y el medio ambiente respiró cuando el hombre paró.
So in the last few years in Medellin, Colombia, where Nancy's from, they've had to like curtail a lot of activities due to pollution, and because of COVID, things completely shut down in areas where people were having trouble breathing and surviving, and it was really actually a very big positive.
Entonces, las personas a nivel mundial nos dimos cuenta de que la Tierra necesita respirar y que nosotros vamos demasiado rápido y por ir tan rápido estamos atropellando la naturaleza y el curso natural de la Tierra.
So we realized finally that the earth needs to breathe, and that we can have effect on her being able to breathe.
Thank you.
Entonces es importante la conciencia que se ha empezado a generar y cómo los pequeños grupos como Manos Unidas y grupos como Working Cities y otros grupos que se realizan en la comunidad, aprovechamos justo este momento para que esa conciencia despertara y entre todos empezáramos a trabajar en que si vamos a avanzar no es por encima de cualquier resultado, o sea, por encima de las circunstancias no se puede avanzar. Hay que pensar en el curso natural, en la naturaleza, cómo funciona y no atropellar eso para no generar una destrucción después.
Qué lindo, mujer. Yo creo que nos van a cortar muy pronto.
Ok, dale porque ya terminé.
The last sentence I will share with you, Nancy has a lot to say, as we can see. Beautiful. He says that small grassroots groups such as Manos and Working Cities and others in our community have realized that this is a beautiful time to raise awareness and to understand the natural course of our earth and our connection with her.
Yeah, that's it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nancy. We'll come around again for sure. There'll be more opportunities. We want to hear everything you have to say. So, Maya, you're next.
Hi, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you to my fellow panelists for sharing. It's been really lovely hearing about the work that you're doing in the community. So my name is Maya Richards. I grew up in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and I've recently returned back here and have been working in the community ever since. So I'm really happy to be here with you tonight. I've always been drawn towards climate and social justice work. So I'm really appreciative that my work as a sustainability and justice coordinator with Bridge has allowed me to really dive into those interests and see the work in action. So as a kid, the idea of climate change has always really alarmed me, and I couldn't for the life of me realize why more people didn't seem fazed by this seemingly unavoidable fate that we all shared. So as I got older, I was able to study advocacy and international conflict resolution in college, and I was able to learn a little bit more about the global issue of climate change. and it just piqued my interest more and more. But I realized that as I got older, there were these two sort of suggestions that really framed our conversations around climate change that I constantly remembered hearing, and now I'm realizing to be incredibly false. So these two narratives were that climate change will take lots of time for us to actually notice the impact of the effects of climate change. I was told at middle school that climate change was something that my grandchildren's grandchildren would have to deal with, and now we know that isn't true. I also remembered hearing that climate change would be this apolitical and indiscriminate crisis that could be this kind of great equalizer and force different communities to come together and put aside our differences to come up with creative solutions, because the impacts of climate change would be indiscriminate and affect us all over the globe. But I've also found that that narrative isn't necessarily true. So the first narrative, climate change is real and it's here and we're noticing the impacts now, as we heard in some of the narratives earlier that we heard about Hurricane Katrina, different natural disasters that are kind of spiking and sweeping through our country and the world. But that second narrative, that the effects of climate change would be indiscriminate, I'm realizing after I've had an opportunity to look into the global community and into my own community locally here, that there are vulnerable populations that are affected indiscriminately by crises and by climate change. So these vulnerable populations usually have fewer access to resources, and we at Bridge we really saw this over the course of the past year during the COVID outbreak. So Bridge is a grassroots organization that's dedicated to advancing equity and justice in the community. And it's also a catalyst for change through collaboration, education, training, dialogue, and advocacy. So when we started to recognize a crisis in earlier in the year, we really pivoted to respond to that crisis, and we recognized that in our own community there were a lot of issues with food insecurity and sort of emergency preparedness that we wanted to respond to and sort of help the communities that we typically deal with. So Bridge has been doing a lot of work with food sovereignty through food distribution. And it's not sort of the typical food distribution where we're just distributing food, but there's also a sort of education and access piece to the distribution work that we're doing. So along with helping communities have access to fresh and clean food, we're also helping communities have access to education to grow their own gardens and to prepare their own food that they grow at their own houses and yards, and how to can and jar food to extend the shelf life of the food that they're growing, and how to make medicine and different home rem food that they're growing. So it's sort of that idea of not only giving someone, not only teaching somebody how to fish rather than just giving them a fish, but also giving them access to a stream and a fishing pool and the tools and resources to sustain themselves. So that's sort of the work that I've been really interested in over the summer, and also through Bridge we're doing some work with the town of Great Barrington for their municipal vulnerability preparedness grant on climate action, resilience, and equity. So working with the town and helping them approach the issue of climate change through a lens of equity and reducing vulnerability of populations that are already vulnerable. So I think that that's
great.
an introduction for myself. And yeah, again, I'm just really happy to have you all here tonight and to keep this conversation going.
Thank you, Maya. I want to give Anaelisa a chance just to translate the most. Anaelisa, that was quite something to remember. Can you manage?
It'll be a little bit of a challenge to translate all that, but I will give a brief summary. A beautiful sharing, thank you. Ella trabaja con la organización Bridge, Puente, y pues ella siempre pues está notando mucho que hay una cierta gente indiscriminadamente afectada por el cambio climático. Y pues el Bridge en estos días ha estado trabajando mucho a través de colaboraciones en la comunidad con la inseguridad de comida que hay en la comunidad, con enseñarle a la gente usar la comida, las hierbas, etcétera, para hacer remedios caseros, para curarse, por ejemplo, o protegerse de ciertas cosas como COVID. De como poner en las manos de la gente la capacidad de hacer cambios a través de por ejemplo, de dieta, de comida, como proyectos sostenibles.
No, es que la educación en la alimentación, Ana, es esencial porque estamos creyendo todo lo que nos dicen y todo es por dinero, o sea, todo es publicidad para poder mover dinero hacia ciertos lados. Esto es increíble. Entonces estamos olvidando que el sistema es autoinmune, o sea, el sistema mismo, nuestro cuerpo se cura.
Sí, exacto. Nancy knows how beautiful that is, that we can help self-educate our people to find the tools through food and remedies, etc., to cure themselves.
Right. Yeah, beautiful. I think that's a topic I'd like to get back to actually just in a little bit. Jamuna had prepared some facts and figures that are really striking that you wanted to share, Jamuna, right?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I thought I would start just with a definition of environmental justice. So environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So let's move to the definition of environmental racism. Whether by conscious design or institutional neglect, actions and decisions that result in the disproportionate exposure of people of color to environmental hazards and environmental health burdens. And I would add economic burdens to that definition. The history of the environmental justice movement is, the seeds are planted were planted in 1983. The U.S. General Accounting Office conducted a study that found 3 out of 4 of the off-site commercial hazard waste landfills in the South were in predominantly African-American communities. And the number was shocking, considering that African-Americans made up only 20% of the regional population at the time. And then in 1987, the newly formed Commission for Racial Justice found that race was the strongest variable in predicting the location of waste facilities. So the environmental justice movement was born at the nexus of the civil rights and environmental movements. And there are just 5 facts that I would like to share. Fact 1, this is from the Center for American Progress. Communities of color have higher exposure rates to air pollution than their white non-Hispanic counterparts. Landfills, this is number 2. Landfills, hazardous waste sites, and other industrial facilities are most often located in communities of color. Number 3, lead poisoning disproportionately affects children of color. Fact 4, climate change disproportionately affects low-income communities and communities of color. And this was what I was referring to with Hurricane Katrina. Water contamination, number 5, water contamination plagues low-income areas and communities of color across the nation. So there's verifiable, credible research showing that environmental racism is a threat to the health and overall safety of communities across the country. And there are solutions, and we really, it's really up to us to start educating each other on this issue. And there are tools to address the injustice and to develop policies with communities of color in mind. And so we really want to start opening these doors and creating a climate of recognition of this. So that's my, yeah.
Yeah.
Did everybody hear that?
Yes, no, we hear you really clearly. It's as though you're in the Zoom room, I mean in the other room. Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good.
I was just wondering if Maya or Nancy or Anaelisa want to respond to these facts in any way. Is there more you would like to say, just in terms of the current situation, just on the ground?
Yeah, actually, Peter, could you actually put those facts back up on the presentation for us?
In the meantime, I wonder if I could give a very brief one-sentence translation of Jamuna's sharing.
Yes, please, Anaelisa, always feel free. I'm sometimes not sure if you're translating when Nancy's muted. So yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so la definición que compartió sobre racismo medioambiental, se trata de un tratamiento justo de todas las personas, no importa su raza, su color, su clase, etc.
Media Estados Unidos.
Que en unos artículos que ella ha estado estudiando, 3/4 de los sitios están localizados cerca o pues en la mitad de comunidades de color. Entonces eso sí es como una preocupación fuerte. Después compartió que son las comunidades de color, por ejemplo en la costa, por ejemplo de donde ella viene, en Luisiana, que más en estos tiempos están viendo cambios climáticos en el mar y en la costa y en locales así. Entonces pues ahí te dejo con esas ideas.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Anaelisa. Maya, you were going to say something, right?
Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing these facts. I really appreciate seeing them. And it definitely made me think of a common theme that we hear over and over again while talking to different communities of color or different communities, immigrant communities or communities that might not speak English as their first language. But it's this feeling of invisibility. And it kind of cuts through all aspects of life. And it really, I feel like these facts really depict that. So it seems like there's no reluctance really to place landfills or hazardous waste sites or different things that could contaminate water in communities that have higher people of color or low-income communities. So I think that there really is, it's almost like their presence is is invisible. There's little or lesser value for their life or their health, and it really takes communities to advocate for these oftentimes marginalized or oppressed communities, because they have that invisibility, that's a barrier that they're constantly dealing with. So I think that there needs to be more advocacy work highlighting the fact that these communities are put in these dangerous and unhealthy situations, and really yeah, there needs to be more advocacy work around that.
Right. Anaelisa, you want to just translate that?
Ella está diciendo que hay temas comunes en las comunidades de bajo ingreso y muchas veces en las comunidades de color. Esas comunidades tienen una presencia invisible muchas veces y hay que abogar por estas comunidades marginadas para que tengan voz, porque muchas veces están viviendo situaciones peligrosas que ni hablan, ni lo hablan, ¿verdad?
Okay.
Are there, Judy, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, this is Judy speaking. This is a question, well, it could be for Jamuna, and maybe Maya wants to answer too. These facts, these 5 facts, which, as Maya said, are not that visible to many people, are very impactful when you really get what's going on. And I'm wondering how it's going in terms of educating people, perhaps, on a local level, and also how the advocacy is going in terms of, getting change happening through advocating on a local level.
Maya, do you want to go first? No?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
I'll respond. I'm speaking anecdotally. I'm not looking at statistics on the Berkshire County environmental justice movement, but anecdotally, I see 2 parallel paths. One is a conscientious effort by people who care. Berkshire County, it's something I love about Berkshire County. There's a lot of people who take their civic responsibility seriously and are engaged in effective ways, and it's something that I really love about Berkshire County, particularly a lot of the female-led movements. I also think that the education within our community I think a stronger effort is needed to educate people, and as you said, on these particular facts that are not always transparent. So there's this idea of what environmental justice is, and there is a passionate response to that, but there's also a lack of knowledge throughout the community, the country, and the world of really specifically how that plays out in terms of the health and economics of our communities of color. And that information is not out there. And I hope that from this gathering right this evening will lead us into stronger next steps, because we do have to take these steps. We have to get the information out there. I mean, it's just not widely understood. And I think, yes, we really have to put forth that effort to get that information out there.
And I would just add that, yeah, so in my work with Bridge, I have definitely seen that there has been some momentum in the community when it comes to educating and educating the community on different issues and trying to access different communities that have been traditionally marginalized. For example, the town of Great Barrington applying for an MVP grant, so a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant that is specifically focused on looking at the issue of climate change through an equity lens. A lot of what that means is they'll be partnering with organizations that already do equity work and educating the people that are in charge of the policy in the community, in the municipality, and educating them on how to look at things through a racial lens, or understanding different pieces of poverty and privilege that contribute to what needs to get done. So that's been, there's definitely a request for more education there, which is really reassuring. Also, Bridge has gotten funding to do some different training and educational programming for people within the food access field in the community. So working with people that are doing food distribution or operating pantries, and helping them access the communities that are typically hesitant to reach out for assistance. So helping them understand the barriers that currently exist, understand some of the reasons why the communities that already have trust in Bridge might not have the same trust in the organizations that are typically responsible for the distribution, or like you're saying, there is sometimes just a lack of education. So connecting the dots and creating opportunities for collaboration, so there's definitely been an education piece there. But I think what's lacking is kind of the follow-up and the action and the next steps. So I think that we're at a point in the community where there's been a lot of really great dialogue, and people are listening and engaging and trying to understand what the barriers are and what the challenges are. But I think that next there needs to be a little bit more accountability on all ends on how we can connect these dots and how we can include the community members that are typically marginalized in the conversations and in the strategies to mitigate change and prepare ourselves for what's down the line.
That's great to hear. I'd like to add,
Jamuna, may I just interrupt just because I don't want to interrupt the flow, but I'm also aware that Anaelisa needs to translate. And it's quite,
okay.
Yeah, so let's give her a chance to do that.
Sure.
Anaelisa, can you do it?
Am I muted? Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Okay, perfecto. So, primero, Jamuna estaba hablando de los hechos impactantes, el hecho impactante de educar a la gente en los espacios locales, sobre los esfuerzos de la gente. Ella dice que es nuestra responsabilidad cívica de envolver a las personas menos escuchadas en la conversación. Después sigue la otra señora Maya y habla sobre educar a la comunidad, algunas becas que se llama MVP que se podrían dar para contractuar el privilegio de ciertas personas y como crear acceso y representación para las comunidades no escuchadas en cuanto a la comida y mucho más. Y pues para cerrar, hablaron de a veces la falta de conocimiento de la comunidad, pues crea como una barrera y toca pues crear conciencia, en pocas palabras.
Okay.
Wow. Impressive. Nancy, do you want to say something now, or shall we go to Jamuna and then come back to you?
Nancy, ¿te gustaría decir algo?
Sí, pues mira, lo más importante es poder volvernos cercanos a la comunidad para que la comunidad sienta la confianza de hablar y expresar sus propias opiniones, que sean esas opiniones su historia verdadera, lo que están viviendo verdaderamente y no algo que estén diciendo por miedo o por el deseo de ser aceptados en la comunidad misma.
Claro. Entonces, the most important thing we can be doing right now, in light of everything that's been spoken, is to bring ourselves closer to the community, to hear the true stories that people have to share that haven't been shared because of fear or the desire to, blend in with the wider community.
Entonces, en eso estamos trabajando muchísimo. Manos Unidas y bueno, los equipos que hemos formado con Bayo y con la ciudad, con la alcaldesa, para crear ese puente de confianza con las personas de la comunidad y de esa manera entonces se puedan sentir libres de poder expresarse y decir verdaderamente cuál es su posición frente a cada cosa que los está afectando.
Claro. Entonces, she says that we've been working extremely hard with Manos Unidas and our partner organizations to create a bridge of trust with the people in the community. Many of them, I am adding this just to clarify for everyone, many of them immigrant Latinos, and so that we can hear their opinions and their viewpoints on the things that most affect them.
Entonces, nosotros, yo pienso que la comunidad, muchas personas en la comunidad no saben verdaderamente cuál es, o sea, qué tipo de problema o cuál es el problema que tienen, porque tienen cosas prioritarias y urgentes que no les permite ver verdaderamente los problemas que tienen.
Claro. So many people in the community have their lives, kind of scheduled in priorities, which makes kind of the underlying problems harder to get to.
So that's the point I'd love to come back to also, because it connects to something Maya said. Maybe Jamuna, do you want to get to your comment now and then we'll circle back?
Sure. And I'm glad I waited till after Anaelisa just spoke because I just wanted to affirm two paths forward that have just been presented to us that I think are strong and effective. And it makes me this is what I love about the Berkshires is people are solution oriented. So Maya, I love what you're doing with Multicultural Bridge, and Multicultural Bridge is the ideal Berkshire County institution to helm, or to forge a path and to be a central focus of a series of partnerships. I mean, I think that I love the idea of storytelling. I mean, I come from the storytelling art form, and I know the power of storytelling to impact change. It's always effective. And so my thoughts right now are, yes, going forward, let's tell these stories. Let's find a way to tell these stories. Let's come together and tell these stories. And working with Multicultural Bridge and other organizations, like we really need the medical community's voice here. And that is something that is often lacking in discourse as relates to impacting change in terms of those people who are most vulnerable to environmental disruption. And so it seems like it would take a series of partnerships to really help educate our community. But I think it's possible, and Multicultural Bridge's work is so effective that maybe I'm volunteering you guys to be the central focus, but it seems logical given your position within that organization and their history of effectiveness in the community. So, and then our community that is a community that loves storytelling. So I just see two paths forward right now, and I want to just affirm that by speaking it.
Yeah, beautiful. I was also curious, Maya, when you said, you know, we need more follow through, what that would look like in your mind.
Great. So thank you for that. I think that, yeah, I appreciate the acknowledgement that the work Bridge does, because they've done so much great things, so many great things. So I always appreciate hearing that. But yeah, so in a lot of the conversations that we've had, people have committed to more follow-up, more education. But I think that a lot of the issues that we're recognizing are systemic. One, so I think that it requires a lot of political will from the people that have political power and decision-making power. And I think that it also it requires a better understanding of resources and how those resources are currently allocated.
Yes.
So we can understand how we can either redistribute resources, or if there needs to be more resources brought in, how we can bring those in an efficient way. I think that this community does do a really great job collaborating, and I think that sharing information is something that we're really great at. I think that following it up with sharing resources and analyzing the information and putting it into action is something that that's the next step. That's definitely what I would like to see. And also so Bridge has funding to provide training for organizations that are interested in accessing different communities. So for organizations that have some of these resources, but their challenge has typically been accessing the communities that Bridge already has an embedded relationship with, we can help educate the people that are already doing work in that field to have a greater impact on the communities that they're trying to reach. So utilizing the resources that exist, and sharing resources and understanding how we can efficiently share, redistribute all of these resources.
Yeah, thank you. Before we go to Nancy, I just want to make sure, Anaelisa, you get a chance. I keep saying it's too late, I think, but anyways, you want to translate, Anaelisa?
Yes. So, Jamuna habló de como la orientación hacia las soluciones, habló sobre la importancia de usar los cuentos para impactar el cambio. Y pues ella como cuentera, como actriz, pues se interesó mucho por ese lado. También habló Maya sobre los asuntos sistémicos que hay, que se necesita voluntad política y alocar recursos mejor a las comunidades que no han tenido, que compartir información y analizar la acción. También dice que tienen una beca para entrenar a las personas que no han tenido conexión directa con las comunidades esforzadas, para pues poder conectarse con esas comunidades. Me parece muy interesante. Perfect. Uli, I think I'd love to weigh in, or have Nancy weigh in whenever it's a good time in response to some of that.
Yes, of course, go for it, totally.
Okay, entonces pues Nancy, me gustaría hablar un poquito de Cafecito, ser más específico como ellos han sido, sobre la cantidad de personas que estamos envolviendo. Y pues sí, el trabajo que estamos haciendo también con la comida. During COVID, we've also been doing a lot of work around food sovereignty ourselves. We actually created a program called Atravesando Esto Juntos, going through this together. And in this project, we had Maria Morengo, our amazing Puerto Rican co-directress, leader, and also cook, who's forming a Puerto Rican cooking cooperative. She helped lead a project with Latina cooks from 5 other countries to cook weekly meals for our Latino families. Over 205 people were served a week, and we delivered them throughout the county from Williamstown to Berkshire and back. And we found that for people having like food that felt relevant to their lives, you know, lovingly cooked, kind of from the Latino community to the Latino community was very, very powerful. And we're hoping to continue that into the future. There's actually still a great need, and we started a food distribution, essentially a food pantry that's held Saturdays at RLC in our collaborators space at 361 North Street. And we've been serving about 150 or more people a week with fresh vegetables and fruits from one of our amazing Texas Guidos, Berkshire Co-op, River Valley Market, among others. And, you know, a lot of our Latino community, we are very close to, have a struggle to, you know, there's a pride barrier, and it can be very hard for them to step forward and say, yes, I am in need, I do have a need. But it's been beautiful, and it's opened a lot of doors and a lot of solidarity building. And now I'm gonna have Nancy just speak really briefly about Cafecito and kind of how education has been a very central part of that. So Nancy, ¿quieres hablar en un momentito sobre Cafecito y sobre pues la importancia de la educación comunitaria? Tal vez las personas que están trabajando con eso.
Sí, claro. Bueno, pues Cafecito es un espacio donde la comunidad misma se encuentra y ya tiene la confianza de poder expresar qué está pasando en la comunidad misma, partiendo de sus propias realidades y de los problemas que están enfrentando en este momento. Ana.
Claro. So Cafecito connects people to the issues at hand, including food sovereignty and you know, economic struggle, all the different struggles that are intertwining, and helps them have a voice around these struggles together.
Y estamos trabajando fuertemente en varios temas, como los que tú mencionaste, y también en la justicia con respecto a la justicia del lenguaje.
So we're working on many themes which feel very relevant to this speaking of the intersections here. And among those themes is language justice.
Y nos estamos enfocando mucho en obtener interpretación directa para los padres, para que los padres se sientan confortables al tratar un tema escolar y que se sientan con la confianza de poderse sentar con sus hijos y poder hablar sobre los compromisos que tienen con la escuela, porque hasta este momento la comunicación ha sido más entre escuela y niños y los padres han sido desplazados.
So we're working a lot around a relationship with the schools and creating trust between the parents and the schools and kind of the whole educational system, which has been sorely lacking in kind of language justice and a kind of feeling like parents have a voice, which is so crucial in these times and any times.
Y en este momento hemos obtenido muy buenos resultados, pero esperamos que podamos llegar hasta un mínimo ideal que fue el que nos propusimos, pero en este momento tenemos una comunicación muy buena con todo el sistema escolar y la alcaldía, y estamos trabajando en equipo. Eso ha permitido que las familias se sientan con más confianza y que puedan empezar a recibir otro tipo de información, conceptos que de pronto para ellos no es tan normal abordar, como el tema de la justicia del medio ambiente.
Claro. Entonces, one thing that we feel is really important is that, you know, we've been opening the lines of communication. We have very close contact right now with the school system and the mayor, and their part actually come into our meetings frequently. And one of the things that we're looking at is how important it is to create, this is something Maya talked about, this, you know, trust with our people. I'm using our people largely, but with the people that we work hand in hand with, because in that sense, I think these are the type of inroads we need to create in order to really have the conversations about things like environmental racism and, you know, environmental justice.
Right.
These are the conversations that people are willing to have when they, you know, feel like they've been heard, I think. Yeah. Muchas gracias.
Right. I was just wondering if there's anyone in the audience which we cannot see who would like to ask a question. I want to make sure we get to you before our time is up. You could type it in the chat and we'll see it there. There were some very powerful comments and a lot of them. So if there's no question, I'll refer to those. But if there is, we want to make room for that. Do you see anyone in the chat, Peter, that would like to ask a question? No?
Ana.
None at the moment, but I can keep my eye on it and I'll let you know if any show up.
Okay. No, that's fine. I was struck by a couple of comments because they really relate to what we were just speaking about, this trust building. And one of them from Natalie Narosky was about the climate movement, you know, always having focused a lot on greenhouse gas emissions and technology and solar panels. And what easily gets lost out of sight is people, you know, people and their connection to each other and their fundamental non-difference on some level and their very big difference on other levels. So like Jamuna was explaining with this with these numbers. So I was just wondering if any of you wanted to comment on that. I'm trying to find this comment where she said it very interestingly or clearly. She says, environmental justice recognizes that simply looking at environmental pollution in and of itself is insufficient unless we recognize communities are impacted first and worst by climate disruption, and that many of the solutions in the environmentalist toolbox are not people-centered and are not getting us even close to moving the needle on where we need to be.
Así es.
Does someone want to speak to that?
I think Maya made a comment earlier that I agree with, where she talked about, I don't remember the words, but ultimately the sense of it is that this speaks to systemic racism, and so it's economic, it's political, it's social, it's cultural, right? And it's and it has to do with the way that capitalism is practiced now, which is where you know, American companies make money by destroying lives and the planet and people's health. And there are other companies that are not American that do this, but this is, you know, American is a big player in the destruction of our environments and our the culture of polluting and destroying people's health and the planet for profit. And that is so much a part of what we understand capitalism to be. And I'm not saying you know, well, anyway, yeah. And so there's this, we don't want to confuse capitalism with democracy, which is that, you know, you can make a living, you have experienced self-determination, you are empowered. But then if you are allowed, if it's legal to do this at the destruction of others, that's when we are in the position we're in now, because it's legal. And, you know, our politicians are purchased, and our election system contributes to this, right? Because we live in an oligarchical society now. We're not in a democracy at this moment. Our country is run by big businesses and the politicians they own. Mm-hmm. So it is a huge issue. And we in Berkshire County can do what needs to be done, which is we take the first steps here. Mm. And we gather our resources here, because our resources are plentiful and they are rich. We are rich in human resources here. And so that's, yeah. I always believe that we have to have action steps. And so those are our action steps.
Yeah, I see Maya nodding. Nancy, did you want to comment on that? Anaelisa, do you want to translate first?
Sí, quisiera comentar sobre eso. Yo primero traduzco, después si quiere comentar.
Okay.
Habló Uli sobre mover la aguja de la justicia, no solo en asuntos medioambientales, pero en otros asuntos que fallan a las personas, más o menos como tú estabas diciendo, mujer. Después, Jamuna habló del racismo sistémico, cultural, político, de clase. El capitalismo, dice ella, está destruyendo vidas. Una cultura de polucionar el mundo. Y pues los primeros pasos tenemos que tomar nosotros mismos en nuestra comunidad local, con los recursos ricos y de plenitud, que sí los hay, y tenemos que usarlos bien. Y tenemos que hacer puntos de acción.
Sí, yo estoy absolutamente de acuerdo con eso, y por eso estamos trabajando fuertemente en ese sentido. ¿Y de qué manera? Estamos tratando de generar emprendimiento que nos empiece a mover la zona, o sea, que haya un autosostenimiento y autoconsumo para que la misma zona se sostenga. Esa es una de las maneras en que, digamos, se cuida también el medio ambiente.
Claro que sí. Entonces, Nancy is in complete agreement. She talks about how important it is to create spaces of ownership and entrepreneurship that are local, to inspire and empower people in our zone, in our spaces in the Berkshires, to create mechanisms that are self-sustaining, to create products that are consumed by our local population. These are ways that we can start to, and I add this in, to change some of these structures that are very, very well developed in terms of racism and environmental racism and class and all these other barriers.
Yo quiero hacer un zoom de pronto, Ana, con respecto al tema de la alimentación, porque yo he tenido la oportunidad de estar en unos cursos que hacen acá, que son como Master Cook, algo así.
Mujer, estás diciendo que te gustaría hacer un Zoom con todo el mundo como
No, me gustaría aclarar un poquito, hablar un poquito más de eso. O sea, hablar algo con respecto a eso.
Sí. So Nancy would propose as one point of action, perhaps, that we do a Zoom, create a Zoom where we talk about food sovereignty and, you know, kind of creating food resources, creating deeper access for people to, you know, be a part of creating, you know, a food network.
Porque resulta, Ana, que en esos cursos que yo he hecho de Master Cook, en esos cursos la información que dan, hay información que sí es cierta, pero hay información que realmente a mí no me convence. Por ejemplo, ¿por qué no advierten a las personas y las concientizan con respecto al consumo de enlatados? O sea, es que es más sano, obviamente, consumir productos naturales, productos orgánicos, productos que sean incluso cultivados aquí mismo.
Claro que sí. He speaks about, you know, kind of speaking of like sovereignty, food sovereignty, kind of in a broader, you know, concept. You know, she's done some of the trainings and accompanied some of our members in you know, local food training programs, and she feels like we need to, you know, kind of really talk about the dangers of eating processed foods and the, you know, the huge way that we could affect our community by encouraging, you know, people growing their own food, people eating, you know, as close to natural or organic as they can. You know, all of these things are important for our community.
Yeah, thank you so much. But sorry to interrupt, but we're actually at the end of the time. Peter, can we have everyone say a few final words? Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can keep this open as, you know, for a while, so don't worry about it.
Oh, great. Okay, fabulous. Awesome. So, okay, well, I interrupted Nancy. Why don't you then start, Nancy, and finish your thoughts, and we'll wrap up with that going around.
Nancy, ¿podrías cerrar con algunos pensamientos sobre tal vez puntos de acción o pues como estabas ya en ese hilo y después se va a pasar a todo el mundo para cerrar?
Ok. Bueno, pues yo creo que lo más importante es aprovechar el momento en el que estamos, donde la comunidad está muy dispuesta a empezar a trabajar y a generar un cambio en sus propias vidas. Y si aprovechamos esto, vamos a obtener unos resultados muy buenos.
So she just wants to emphasize that the most important thing we can be doing, and close to her former comments as well, is to take advantage of this amazing moment when our community has very open hearts and real change can really start to be generated. So, and I'll just add in, I think, you know, this is definitely a time for taking collective action in light of that, and you know, however we can, you know, see some of these ideas out in the real world together, I think it would be impactful and make a difference.
Yeah, thank you. I really do love actually what you brought out as a potential way forward. Maya, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I would love to just thank all of you for tuning in this evening. I think this has been a great conversation, and I've really enjoyed hearing about other people's perspective on the issue and some other things going on in the community. Also wanted to echo what Nancy said. I think that times of crises or conflict can often be kind of scary for people, but I think that it really is an opportunity for us to come together and have collaborative conversations about how to create change that can be creative and leave us all in a better place than we started before the crisis or conflict hit. So I would encourage all of you to keep the conversations going and try to follow up those conversations and the dialogue with action. this is a really collaborative community, so people are often willing to talk and work together. I'm going to also leave my email in the chat if anybody wants to collaborate with Bridge further in any of the work that we're doing with food sovereignty or community preparedness. So thank you all for coming tonight, and yeah, have a great night.
Thanks so much, Maya. We'll definitely be in touch. Anaelisa, did you want to translate that quickly?
Yeah, I'm just going to be really brief since I know that, you know, we have richness, lots of richness we shared already. Maya habla de que está de acuerdo, Nancy, contigo, que de verdad las conversaciones reales que se pueden tener ahora, como a través del ojo de la crisis, son súper importantes y que ella pues quisiera ver que siguiéramos la conversación en el mundo de afuera.
And Jamuna.
I have really enjoyed this evening and hearing other people's perspectives, other people's experiences, and our shared concerns and our shared ideas on action steps, and that's heartening. I agree with Maya. We live in a wonderfully collaborative community, and if there is a community that can come together to impact change, Berkshire County is that community. Mm-hmm. And so I look forward to us forging this path forward together, you know, collectively and individually within our own fields and our own resources.
Anaelisa?
Yes, so Jamuna dice que ella se siente muy agradecida con las ideas compartidas y los pasos de acción que se han compartido, que de verdad, como lo dijo Maya, somos una comunidad muy colaborativa. Si hay una comunidad que puede afectar el cambio en este momento, sería la comunidad de los Berkshire.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. On behalf of Living the Change and the museum, it's been really, really rich. I feel you've shared a lot and you've pointed out a few very concrete steps we might take, and my head's already going with ideas, so I will definitely be in touch, and I hope others will be too. Thanks again. I'm so glad we did this, and I really appreciated all your input, and I think the listeners did too. So
thank you, Uli. Thank you, Peter.
To be continued.
And if anyone would like to reach out to Manos, you can reach out at manosunidas.org@gmail.com.
Let me type that in the chat as well. Manos Unidas.
org@gmail.com.
Oh, got it. Okay, great. Thanks again. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night, all.
Bye.
Gracias.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.